Welcome to Bedtime Battles, where history meets calm gameplay. Here, legendary wars and forgotten struggles are told softly, while relaxing play unfolds on screen. This is where the chaos of battle becomes a story to rest with, and the games you watch turn into tales for the night. Settle in, relax, and let's begin. It was the spring of 1944 in northern France. The war had stretched on for 5 long, unforgiving years. The fields of Normandy, once green and peaceful, had been torn apart by bombs, the earth scarred by trenches, and the air filled with the distant rumble of artillery. In the middle of this world, a young soldier named Henri found himself caught between duty and survival. Henri was not a career soldier. Before the war, he was a farmhand in the countryside near Caen. He had grown up among wheat fields and apple orchards, his life measured by the rhythm of harvests and the quiet turning of the seasons. But when war arrived, that life ended. Henri was called into the French army, and later, after the occupation, he found himself forced into resistance against the German forces who had taken his homeland. Now, in the spring of 1944, he was a man who had seen too much for his young years. Only 24, yet he carried himself like someone twice his age. One cold morning, Henri crouched behind the remains of a stone wall on the edge of a small village. The houses were broken, roofs collapsed, windows shattered. Once, children had run through these streets. Now, silence reigned, broken only by the occasional crack of rifle fire in the distance. Henri's hands shook as he clutched his rifle. He hadn't eaten properly in days. Supplies were scarce, and each day was a question of survival, whether from hunger, the weather, or the enemy patrols that swept through the countryside. But despite the fear, despite the exhaustion, he refused to give up. His struggle was not just for himself, but for the memory of the France he once knew. The peaceful fields, the songs in the village square, the warmth of his mother's bread fresh from the oven. He fought so that one day such things might return. That day, Henri had been ordered to carry a message across enemy lines. Communication was dangerous. Radios could be intercepted. Couriers could be captured. But Henri had always been quick, silent, and careful. His commander trusted him for this task. He moved cautiously through the ruins, every shadow a threat. The street smelled of smoke and damp stone, and his boots crunched softly against rubble. As he passed a collapsed barn, he froze. Ahead, 2 German soldiers were speaking quietly, their voices echoing through the empty air. Henri's breath caught in his throat. He pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding in his ears. If they saw him, there would be no escape. Slowly, carefully, he waited until they moved on, their boots fading into the distance. Only then did he dare to move again, each step feeling heavier than the last. By nightfall, Henri had reached a farmhouse on the outskirts of the village. It was abandoned, but inside he found shelter. The moonlight streamed through a broken window, painting pale shapes across the floor. Henri lowered himself to the ground, exhaustion overtaking him. He reached into his coat and pulled out the small scrap of paper, the message he had risked everything to carry. It was not long, just a few lines written in hurried script. It spoke of Allied movements, of whispers of an invasion coming soon. For Henri, the words carried hope. Hope that the war might turn, that liberation might come. But for now, his world was survival. He leaned back against the cold wall, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. He closed his eyes, just for a moment. He thought of home, the orchard in springtime, his younger sister's laughter, the smell of rain on warm soil. He let the memories carry him, if only to drown out the fear that surrounded him. The next morning, Henri awoke to danger. Boots echoed outside the farmhouse. German voices barked orders, and the sound of a dog's growl sent shivers through him. He grabbed his rifle, but he knew he couldn't fight, not against so many. He slipped silently out the back, moving quickly across the fields. Bullets cracked through the air as soldiers spotted him. Henri threw himself into the tall grass, crawling on his stomach as the dog barked louder, closer. His chest heaved, every breath ragged, as he fought the rising panic. And then, silence. The voices faded. The soldiers, convinced he had escaped farther, moved on. Henri lay there for what felt like an eternity, afraid to move, afraid even to breathe too loudly. That night, Henri reached the safe house where he was meant to deliver the message. A small candle burned in the window, the agreed-upon signal. Inside, other resistance fighters welcomed him with quiet relief. They read the note, their faces lighting with cautious hope. "Maybe," one of them whispered, "maybe the end is coming." For Henri, that hope was enough. Enough to keep moving, enough to keep struggling, enough to believe that his battles, his hunger, his fear, were not in vain. Days turned to weeks. The fighting grew fiercer. Rumors spread that Allied forces were gathering, preparing to storm the beaches of Normandy. Henri clung to those rumors like a lifeline. Each day he woke, each night he survived. He told himself, "Hold on a little longer." He saw comrades fall. He saw villages destroyed. He buried friends in shallow graves, marked only with stones. The weight of war pressed heavily on him, but still, he endured. And then, one June morning, the skies above France filled with the roar of planes. The beaches erupted with fire and steel. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, had begun. Henri, though weary and battered, rose with his fellow fighters. The long night of occupation was breaking. He had survived long enough to see the beginning of liberation. Henri's struggle in the war was one among millions. A single life, a single story, in a sea of countless others. But to him, to those who knew him, it was everything. His courage, his endurance, his quiet determination in the face of fear became part of the greater battle that shaped history. And when, at last, France was free, Henri returned to his farm. The orchards grew again, the wheat fields swayed in the summer breeze, and the songs of the village filled the air once more. He carried the scars of war, inside and out. But he also carried the knowledge that, even in the darkest nights, survival was possible. That hope, however fragile, could endure. And that is the story of Henri, a soldier in France who fought not only battles with his rifle, but battles within his heart, battles of fear, of hunger, of despair, and who, in the end, found his way back to the peace he had always longed for. And so, as the night settles in, let Henri's story remind us of the resilience of the human spirit, even in the midst of war.